Good evening, friends, near and from as far away as Japan. Giving a little shout out to Ayaka from our committee, who's in Japan right now. And welcome to the 40th anniversary commemoration of the historic CWRIC hearings. CWRIC stands for the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians.
And it's also the 33rd anniversary of the passage of the 1988 Civil Liberties Act, which resulted in redress and reparations for Japanese Americans. The CLA finally concluded, almost 50 years after the camps, that the camps were a result of race prejudice, wartime hysteria, and a failure to political leadership.
That's right. I'm June Hibino, and on behalf of NCRR, Nikkei for Civil Rights and Redress, and Nikkei Progressives, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And just a few words about myself. I am a retired Sansei who's retired, born and raised on the East Coast. My father was from Berkeley. And his family was sent to Topaz, Utah. My mom was from Stockton, and her family was incarcerated in Roar, Arkansas.
And hi, my name is Michael Nishimura. I'm a PhD student and I organize with Nikkei Progressives in Los Angeles. I'm a Yonsei Japanese Canadian. My grandfather was incarcerated at Lemon Creek in British Columbia, Canada. We want to give a quick shout out and thanks to Davey Wataki for our intro and closing music tonight. Thank you all so much for joining us from so many different places to share space this evening. We are joining you from the ancestral and unceded lands of the Tongva people, what is sometimes called Los Angeles. We acknowledge the Tongva community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. As our discussion tonight revolves around reparations, we encourage everyone to know what Indigenous land they occupy, to join in solidarity with Indigenous leadership around decolonization processes like Land Back, and work towards dismantling the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism and anti-Blackness in our communities.
Thanks, Michael. So our program tonight, which is an intergenerational effort, is called Reparations Then and Reparations Now. So why did we title the program Reparations Then and Reparations Now? Well, first, we want to celebrate the over 500 formerly incarcerated Japanese Americans who testified at hearings throughout the country. Many of you know that in California, NCRR played a key role in organizing the grassroots to come out and testify. We prepared the first and second generations, called the Issei and Nisei, for months, encouraging them and helping them prepare and practice their testimonies. We pushed the commission to hold more hearings than they had originally planned, and for an evening session in Little Tokyo for working people to attend. And we insisted that the Japanese-speaking members of our community be heard and that translation be provided. You know, I attended the hearings both in San Francisco and in LA. I testified in San Francisco on behalf of my family. I remember in LA, the room at the state office building was packed and it was really hot, but you could have heard a pin drop. We all just sat there transfixed. The testimonies were poignant. They were full of anguish and even shocking. Deeply personal stories were heard for the first time and had not even been shared within families. So just imagine the courage that it took for people to do that. And it was the beginning of a healing process for many. And the people, the everyday working people, they were not shy about demanding reparations. And they really inspired us to keep on fighting throughout the 80s for a redress bill.
Thanks, June. So that was reparations then. And why do we say reparations now? We have to acknowledge the generous support of many Black groups and individuals who supported us in the campaign for redress and reparations. Just as Black Americans supported our community struggles for redress, we will strive to support and show solidarity with Black people as they fight for reparations today. But even beyond this important history, we support reparations simply because it is owed and it is the right thing to do. We firmly believe that no one but Black Americans should decide for themselves what form reparations should take. This means that we will follow the lead of Black individuals and organizations, amplify their voices, respond to their calls, and support their demands.
So we'll now show excerpts of testimonies from the 1981 LA hearings that were videotaped by Visual Communications. And I want to give a huge shout out to VC for capturing these precious testimonies on videotape. This segment was edited and arranged by NCRR member Steve Nagano.
It's unembellished, it's straightforward, and it's a devastating indictment of our government and of our society.
When the photographs of camp were shown at the Pasadena Art Museum some years ago, I burst into tears and could not stop the tears from flowing. All the pent-up emotion held back for so many years was released. The numbness of the evacuation was finally lifted, and because of the humiliation and shame, I could never tell my 4 children my true feelings about that event in 1942. I did not want my children to feel the burden of shame and feeling of rejection by their fellow Americans.
I feel that this hearing has been long overdue, for I equate the evacuation with rape. A rape victim finds it very difficult to talk about it and suffers from shock. And I think that we have been through that period where it has been difficult to talk about.
I've never been able to talk about this. More people have come up to me and said I must speak up. My children, even my own children, don't know that my brother was shot in the back.
When on December 7, 1941, 11 p.m., the FBI entered our home and arrested him and gave no reason. I asked him, "When will he return?" The FBI agent replied, "You may never see him again."
In 48 hours, we were told to pack up and leave from the place we called home for at least 50 years or more.
2 guys walk in my house, and they came to my bedroom, and they say, hey, buddy, wake up. I wake up, and I ask them, what the hell you guys are? Then they flash FBI. He say, FBI. So I thought, what the hell did I do? You're alien, enemy alien. On the train, first time I had a steak. So you know what some of these old men said? The old man said, hey, they feeding us because we're going to die. So I thought, no, this country ain't going to do that kind of stuff, man. You know, it's a democratic country, Bill of Rights, constitutional, and all that. Just go with it, see? But they're not going to do that. This is democracy. You know what one woman say? No, this is not democracy. This is democracy, he said.
Then we reached the place where we see nothing but the snow. We call the Bismarck, North Dakota. Now, I found out the weather was 30 below zero. 30 below zero. Now, I had to walk through the snow with my barefoot and slippers. And the third day, I had a frostbite on my feet. I couldn't go. So I asked our friends to bring food to my camp.
When we got to Santa Anita, we were assigned housing in the stables. Where one horse was housed, we were 3 families.
Not see my father again until the middle of 1946. This inhumane, cruel treatment and happening took place in the good old United States and not in Gestapo Germany. Hard to believe, isn't it?
On August 27, 1941, at 2 a.m., we were informed that our baby had passed away.
At the time of my birth, my mother's physician in camp performed a tubal ligation on her. She never gave her consent.
After 28 hours of labor, the nurse became concerned and sent for the doctor. The doctor examined me and said, "Your baby's heartbeat is getting very faint. I will have to use forceps to deliver the baby, and I will have to give you a local painkiller because we do not have an anesthesiologist. We can't wait any longer because we do not have a resuscitating machine to revive the baby. I remember many details in the delivery room. After using the scalpel to cut me, he picked up the forceps. After much pulling, he finally got the baby out. When I saw her, after 3 days, I noticed a large stab on the back of her head. She has a bald spot there to this day. Madeline is a developmentally disabled person. She is mentally retarded and has grand mal epilepsy.
Are you willing to serve for the United States in case of an enemy invaded us? And it said yes or no. And another one like, are you willing to be loyal to the United States? And yes or no, and etc. I wrote no to all the way through with my anger and disgust and frustration. The brutal action taken against us loyal citizens. My blood was burning with agony and frustration. I was so disgusted that I requested for deportation to Japan, a country I had never seen before. Then I was sent to Tula Lake.
You may wish to simply read the English translation, and that may save a little stress and time.
They worked very hard to prepare this testimony, and I appreciate if you would let them speak in Japanese. Thank you.
The problem we have here is one of time.
But these Japanese-speaking individuals being told to shut up most of their life.
It's not being suggested we're trying to shut anybody up.
Can I have just Japanese without the translation? They can turn in their written English translation.
Whatever their pleasure is would be fine with the commission.
日本語でいいですか。はい。投げ込んでちょうど豚と同じようにされました。それで量も足りません。これで生きていかれるかねと全て覆されてしまいました。家族の生活、安定、土台、覆されてしまいました。一家の柱ともする主人と頼りにしていた長女も亡くなってしまいました。私は本当に苦労が多かったのですが、私たちの本当の苦労と経験とに対するアメリカ政府は償わなきゃならないと思います。
We were the only Japanese American family in Kodiak, Alaska. In a short time, my father and two uncles were arrested and put in concentration camps. I am very bitter about this. I have not seen my father since I was 11 years old. I am now 51 years old. I have missed my father very much, and I wonder I wonder if he's alive today.
We are Peruvian citizens. We were not even in the United States at the time. Now, I understand that, in fact, 5,000 Japanese Peruvians were exchanged for American prisoners of war now. In this process, in this transportation process, the baby died. So we stayed in Crystal City until summer of 1947. I remember as a child when I used to stay, when we used to say, I pledge allegiance to the United States of America. I never felt comfortable about saying it. I couldn't understand why. I think today now I understand why it was that I could not say those words comfortably.
The pain, trauma, and stress of the incarceration experience was so overwhelming. We used the psychological defense mechanisms of repression, denial, and rationalization to keep us from facing the truth. The truth was that the government we trusted, the country we loved, the nation to which we had pledged loyalty had betrayed us, had turned against us. Our natural human feelings of rage, fear, and helplessness were turned inward and buried. Our scars are permanent and deep.
One significant consequence was the effectively silencing of an entire Japanese American community to become the Gomen Nasai people, those who tread lightly as if unwelcome.
As one student stated in her term paper, the shame and humiliation that my parents suffered were passed on to me. And although I never saw barbed wire, tasted mess hall food, or lived in cramped barracks, my mind is still imprisoned from that experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Listen,
I'm sorry.
if we have outbursts like this, we're going to ask people to be removed.
We know how some people are.
Now, wait a second.
I-
There are some.
What are the economic losses? The $6 to $8 billion, although it sounds astonishing, is a minimal figure because we are dealing only with what the government allowed in 1948, okay, which, as you know, was virtually nothing. It was nothing for psychological damages, physical damages, anything that could be connected with evacuation, wrongful death, wrongful incarceration.
Frustration, anger still in my blood. I now demand a monetary compensation of $1 million from the United States government. For ruining my life, career, and injury inflicted upon me and my family. I also demand a monetary compensation of $500,000 each to my 5 children.
I am speaking on behalf of los Frente a los Pueblos Unidos. We're an organization based in the San Fernando Valley fighting for the rights of Latino peoples. And I would like to put it on record right now that we in the Frente believe that the Latino people will stand behind the Japanese people for reparations.
Important that we even take that small attempt to heal the deep wounds that were unjustly inflicted upon Japanese American citizens of this city. For no matter how painful, no matter how shameful it is for us to admit that this city caused fellow Americans untold harm and suffering, we must make these apologies and acknowledge the wrongs that have been committed.
It is an opportunity for us to continue to learn and to sum up this collective experience and to channel the anger and pain into a fighting spirit that demands reparations.
Thank you.
And most importantly, we strongly call for direct monetary compensation to each victim of the concentration camps. This is a historic and significant event. Any compromised recommendation will be a compromise of justice. Thank you.
They talk about being let out of camp in 45, 44, 43. I don't think we ever did get out of camp. I think we're beginning to get out of camp now.
So thank you again to Steve and VC for these incredible video excerpts. I know this might be the first time for some of you seeing this footage. It could be the dozens of times you've seen it, as Kay mentioned in the chat, but I think each time it's equally as powerful and emotional. So I invite everyone to take a breath. Okay, so many of the voices you've just heard and are about to hear have continued the struggle 40 years later. In February 2021, Japanese Americans rallied for HR 40, a bill introduced by the late John Conyers, which would establish a commission to study what Black reparations could look like. Over 300 letters of support were sent to the House Judiciary Committee. Among those letter writers were two people who were actually testifying at the CWRIC hearings, NCRR member Jim Matsuoka and Amy Mass. You'll now see excerpts of their 1981 testimonies and also excerpts from their letters of support for HR 40 from earlier this year, which will be read live by Steve Nagano and Jan Tokumaru. And just before the video plays, I want to quickly note that later in the program, we're gonna have a call to action and we'd love for your participation. I just wanna mention this now so you can all start thinking about how you would respond to the prompt, I support reparations because, in like a sentence or a phrase. And then later we'll be asking for folks to share these in the chat. But okay, for now, let's go to Jim and Amy's testimonies.
So you're trying to hurry me, and I will not be hurried by you as a representative of this government ever.
Well,
now you want me to leave, you can tell me to leave.
no, I'm not telling. There's no point in getting...
Well, don't rush us.
No, I'm not trying to rush you. As a matter of fact, I think if
I've been rushed by this government enough. I was going to talk about my father and the life savings that he's lost. This is all he had. But at this moment now, I will not do that for the simple reason I will not bear my emotions in front of this government. Never, ever again. I went to Manzanar, and that's all I want to really say about it. The only thing I really have to say, though, is that I wish every single American could spend some time there. And that's the only way they're going to fully understand the conditions that we have to live under. I just want to bring out one point to illustrate something. I'm not going into no long story. I was 7 years old when we had a Christmas party. And I remember they provided us with toys from the outside. And I got this old repainted toy. And the adult who gave it to me was rather embarrassed because the toy was clearly broken. So they passed out this stuff, and I took it, and I could see that he felt very bad. And I can understand these feelings because I have a child of my own. The last thing I'd want to give him is a broken toy. Well, I took that toy, and I threw it in the trash can later on. I looked at it, and I threw it away, right on the spot. To me, that toy symbolizes how we as a minority are treated in this country. Second class, broken, all the promises are broken. So I come up to this table and we get this short shrift, you see. So you can understand why I get pretty hostile when I see this. And on a person-to-person basis, something different. I see you now as the government. And I would just like to say this. There will never be a 442 again. And I'll tell you why. The Nisei were incredibly loyal to the United States. I mean, time after time, you hear the older Nisei say, I can't believe they did this to me. In many cases, their hearts were full of love for this country. They gave it their all. You don't believe me? Go to the Punch Bowl in Hawaii and see how many graves there are there. You know, we talk about the Purple Hearts. See how many graves there are there, how many people died. Now, I want to talk about one other thing before I go. And that is to tell the Japanese American community who the real heroes of this community are. And all these times we've been seeing all these, I don't want to say, but paraded in front of the newspapers as community leaders. And they didn't do two bits for us. The people I want to thank in this community are the common people, such as the Nisei domestic, the clerk, and the gardener. And you know why? Why they are the true heroes? Because they kept us from starving while our own country turned its back on us. They worked hard, and they never got any recognition. If it wasn't for them, we would not have done that.
To the Honorable Jerry Nadler and Jim Jordan. This letter is to express my support for the passage of H.R. 40 so that justice might be sought for the African American community. My name is Jim H. Matsuoka of West Covina, California. As the former internee of Manzanar, the call for justice rings loud and true to me. Having to endure the poverty and humiliation of being imprisoned for no crime other than that of my racial origin, I understand this call clearly. Our family was stripped of everything other than what we could carry into the camp with our two hands. After we were released from Manzanar, after some 3.5 years of imprisonment, we sank into a life of poverty, epitomized by a tiny, shabby trailer we were forced to live in. There were times when we couldn't even make the rent on the shelter. My father was unemployed and stayed that way for the rest of his life, except for when he managed to find a job, washing dishes occasionally. My father's life savings were frozen at the Sumitomo Bank by the US and wiped off the books as, quote, enemy alien assets. 20 years of his dream to start a new life in this country were wiped off the books in a second. Redress, perhaps a letter of apology, and monetary redress from the government could have made a difference to him before he passed on. I urge you to help a study commission come into being. It is time to bring justice home to America. Let us remove the barriers of color once and for all. I look forward to taking down all the barbed wire of racism and hatred that imprisoned me and destroyed my father's reason for being in America. Sincerely, Jim H. Matsuoka.
My name is Amy Iwasaki Mass. I'm a clinical social worker and have worked in the profession for 23 years. For the last 12 years, I have been in private practice. My specialty has been working with Japanese Americans. I'm also a member of the social work faculty at Whittier College. I was 6 years old when the war broke out between the United States and Japan. I spent 3 years of my childhood in a concentration camp at Heart Mountain, Wyoming. I remembered the guard towers, the soldiers with their guns pointed into us. Weren't they there? Weren't they supposed to be protecting us from all of the potentially dangerous, hostile people outside? I remembered the hatred in the eyes of the man and the woman who ran a restaurant in Butte, Montana. My mother and her friends tried to enter the restaurant during a train stop as we were on the return trip home from camp. The East Bay ladies did not read the No Japs Allowed sign that was in the window. By then, I was 10. I could read, and I herded the ladies away from the restaurant. I remembered feeling bad about being Japanese, of being even able to speak Japanese, of having Japanese parents. I felt ashamed because I loved my parents. I also loved America. I get goosebumps when I sing the Star-Spangled Banner. I believed what our teachers taught us about what a great country America is. It was more tempting and easier to believe the propaganda and rationalizations of the American government in order to defend ourselves against the truth. Rather than facing the truth that America was being racist and unfair, we wanted to believe that America did not hate and reject us. This is the same psychological defense that beaten and abused children use. Abused children suffer from depression and shame. Mental health experts have found that abused children prefer to believe that they were bad rather than to believe that their parents are bad. Like the abused child who still wants his parents to love him and hopes that by acting right, he will be accepted, the Japanese Americans chose the cooperative, obedient, and quiet American facade to cope with an overtly hostile, racist America. By trying to prove that we were 110% super patriotic Americans, we hoped to be accepted. The problem is that acceptance by submission exacts a very high price. It is at the expense of the individual sense of true self-worth. Though we may be seen by others as model Americans, we have paid a tremendous psychological price for this acceptance. On the surface, we do not look like former concentration camp victims, but we are still vulnerable. Our scars are permanent and deep.
February 11th, 2022. Honorable Chairman Jerry Nadler and Honorable Ranking Member Jim Jordan. I support H.R. 40 and seek your help in promoting this bill. As a 7-year-old Japanese American who was incarcerated at Heart Mountain Relocation Center, I spent 3 years of my childhood imprisoned by the US government, behind barbed wire, and unable to live freely as an American citizen. As I grew older and examined my feelings about being betrayed and shamed by my country and rejected and torn about my ethnic identity, I realized that I and my friends suffered a deep sense of depression from our early years being imprisoned because of our race. In 1981, I gave testimony to the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians. The findings of the commission, concluding that the decision to imprison us was not justified by military necessity, but instead based on race prejudice, war hysteria, and failure of political leadership, was an important factor in allowing us to reaffirm our sense of pride in who we are. Having the US government recognize and take responsibility for its error was a significant part of the healing process. The injustice and inhumane treatment of African Americans has been deep and pervasive from the beginning of our country's history. There are many in our country who do not understand or accept this. I found the Commission approach for Japanese Americans was a useful way to educate the larger American public to information they had been blind to. I hope HR 40 can do the same for African Americans. Sincerely, Amy Iwasaki, Mass.
My best friend was Roland, a young Japanese child, same age. I will never forget, Mr. Chairman and members of this body, never forget, because the moment is burned indelibly upon this child's memory, 6 years of age. The day the 6x trucks came to pick up my friend. I would never forget the vision of fear in the eyes of Roland, my friend, and the pain of leaving home as he screamed not to go. And this 6-year-old black American child screamed back, "Don't take my friend." This meager $20,000 is also compensation for the pain and the agony that he felt and that his family felt. This meager $20,000 in 1942 terms, $2,800, is also compensation for the thousands of dollars of personal belongings that were strewn on the streets on 10th and Wood Street in West Oakland in 1942. Because in case you don't know it, they could only take what they could carry. This is not about how long you were imprisoned. It is about how much pain was inflicted upon thousands of American people who happen to be yellow in terms of skin color, Japanese in terms of ancestry. But this black American cries out as loudly as my Asian American brothers and sisters on this issue.
That was Congressman Ron Dellums giving his passionate statement in support of H.R. 442, our bill, during the 1987 floor vote in the House. I am Mia Iwataki. I'm a founding member of NCRR, which then was the National Coalition for Redress and Reparations. My mom was imprisoned in Manzanar, while my dad fought in the 100 442nd Battalion, an all-segregated Japanese American unit. The commission hearings changed my life. They helped my community to really unify. As a longtime activist, our movement for justice and reparations was inspired by the civil rights and the Black and Chicano liberation movements. And leaders like Reverend Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Fred Hampton. So we are inspired to be and honored to share a conversation tonight with three prominent leaders of the Black reparations movement. And I'll introduce them all at once in the beginning. Nkechi Taifa is coming to us tonight from Washington, D.C. It's pretty late out there. She's a longtime activist in movements for justice, Black Power, nationalist, Pan-African, anti-apartheid, and focusing on issues including racial justice, policing, voting rights, Black Power, and reparations. She is also an attorney, a scholar, and an author of Black Power, Black Lawyer, and co-author of Reparations, Yes, written in 1987. Nkechi is a founding member of NCOBRA and an inaugural commissioner of the National African American Reparations Commission and is a leading spokesperson on the issue of reparations. Welcome, Nkechi. Our next guest is Akinyele Umoja. Akinyele is a scholar, activist, and a founding member of the New African People's Organization and the Malcolm X grassroots movement. He is also a professor of Africana Studies at Georgia State University and is giving his students extra credit tonight for tuning in. Akinyele is a well-known author of We Will Shoot Back, Armed Resistance and the Mississippi Freedom Movement. And he's the co-editor of Black Power Encyclopedia. He's also a longtime activist and organizer as an advocate for reparations, political prisoners, and the Black liberation movements. Fun fact, Akinyele and I worked at KPFK Radio in Los Angeles. Cam Howard is the national male co-chair of NCOBRA, the National Coalition on Black Reparations in America, and joins us from Chicago. Cam is an internationally respected reparations activist presenting at the 8th Pan-African Conference in Johannesburg, South Africa, and Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. In 2016, he was a key organizer for the visit of the United Nations Working Group for People of African Descent to the US that ended up proclaiming that the US must engage in reparations. As a member of NARC, he led a team to revise HR 40 in 2016. And in 2020, he worked for passage of the Chicago Subcommittee on Reparations. He recently authored Laying the Foundation for Local Reparations, a guide for providing national symmetry for local reparations efforts. Wow, what a group. Thank you for being here. But before we dive into the first issue area, I wanted to know if this was the first time that you'd seen any of the testimonies from our 1981 hearings, and, you know, what did you feel?
I'm embarrassed to say, Mia, that was the first time I have witnessed that. I feel so full. I feel so full of emotion as a result of the personal testimonies that people are talking about taking history out of the schools. This needs to be everywhere. Thank you so much for sharing.
I would agree. Actually, and Mia mentioned we used to work together at KPFK, and I want to thank Mia, and I want to thank the organization for allowing me to share the space, not only with her, but my good comrades and friends, Cam and Kishi. But you know, I remember, you know, I moved to Georgia in 1984, so I remember the early days of the struggle. And so to actually see the testimony is very moving. I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of commonality, questions like trauma, questions like betrayal. I saw the comparison of oppressed people being compared to victims of domestic violence. All of these things came up in the testimony. And Cam and Kishi, the last couple of years, they've been a part of course I've taught the last 2 years around reparations for people of African descent in the United States. And I really want this to be a regular part of the curriculum for that class. So, because I think even though we talked about the internment of Japanese Americans in the struggle for restitution, I think this and hearing those voices is better than any scholar speaking on it or any article they could read.
Thank you. Okay, so maybe we could, oh, sorry, Cam.
Yes, someone has stated in the chat that was very powerful and emotional, and I totally agree. You know, it reminded me of, you know, some of the enslavement narratives that I've listened to. It reminded me of some of the testimony and some of the narratives of Blacks living in Jim Crow South. And it also reminded me of some of the conversations that our young people are having today of the terror and trauma that they're suffering right now today. And so it's very painful hearing it. It was very emotional for me because all of that I was reliving at the same time. And also it really added deeply to the fact that these 300 letters was written in support of HR 40. So I was able to feel all of that while I was hearing that testimony.
Oh, thank you. So we'll just jump into our first area, talking about the beginnings of the movement for reparations. So I'm gonna just throw out a bunch of things. So how far back does the struggle for reparations go? And what were the roots of the movement? Who were some of the key voices and organizations? And how was reparations talked about early on? And then if you wanna make a comment about, did white supremacy replace slavery? I'm just gonna throw that into the pile.
So, Mia, I'm glad you asked that question about how far back does the Black reparations struggle to go, just what were its roots? Because many people think that the quest for reparations began with Ta-Nehisi Coates' great article on reparations in the Atlantic magazine, or Hannah Nicole Jones's article in the New York Times, or they might have seen something on Twitter. However, I just want to state emphatically that the concept of reparations for Black people in this country did not begin in the 21st century. During the late 19th century, and actually it began before that, but during the late 19th century, there was an organization called the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief, Bounty, and Pension Association, headed up by Reverend Isaiah Dickinson and Callie House, which had 600,000 dues-paying members to obtain compensation in the form of pensions for the enslavement era from federal agencies. And on those heels was the Honorable Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association during the early part of the 20th century, which galvanized hundreds of thousands of Black people seeking repatriation with reparations. Queen Mother Audley Moore of New York had been a follower of the Garvey movement. She championed the issue of reparations during the 50s and the 60s, perhaps the best known advocate for it during that time, even presenting petitions before the United Nations, being active and influential in every single reparations movement until her death in around 1996. Malcolm X talked about the concept of reparations in his speech. Dr. Martin Luther King in his 1963 book, Why We Can't Wait, proposed a Bill of Rights for the disadvantaged. And he talked about coming to Washington to cash that check, and it was marked insufficient funds. We had the Black Panther Party in 1968 listing the issue of payback for slave labor as point number 3 of their 10-point program. And in 1968, we had a group that I was involved with, the Republican New Africa, that basically stated that we claim no rights from the United States other than those rights belonging to human beings wherever they be in the world. And these include the right to damages, reparations due us for the grievous injuries sustained by ourselves and our ancestors by reason of US lawlessness. And in 1969, there was the Black Manifesto, which included a demand that white churches and synagogues pay reparations to Blacks. And the following month, civil rights activist James Foreman interrupted Sunday service at Riverside Church, demanding that the churches pay reparations. In 1972, there was a National Black Political Convention in Gary, Indiana, which adopted the anti-depression program of the Republic of New Africa, which authorized the sum of payment of reparations and a negotiating committee, et cetera, et cetera. You had the Nation of Islam, you had all of these groups. But in 1987, Republican New African President Mario Bedelli issued a call for reparations-loving people across the country to convene in Washington to discuss how to move the issue of reparations for Black people in the US forward. And it was out of that historic September 26, 1987 gathering where the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America in COBRA was born. And it brought diverse groups under one umbrella, ranging from Republican New African People's Organization, to the National Conference of Black Lawyers and other groups. And I will close with this. It was the perfect storm. The Black Power movement was open and receptive to a broad-based approach to further the issue of reparations. The Black legal community sanctioned the largely Black nationalist effort, and we were all invigorated by y'all, by the recent passage of the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. And so it was in the throes of that fertile environment that in COBRA picked up the long-standing mantle of justice, reinvigorating the demand for reparations for Blacks, and broadened the concept through massive public education accompanied by legislative and litigation-based initiatives. So that's just a snapshot. That's just a snapshot up to where NCOBRA started.
And just to add a little bit, because Keisha just gave us a very thorough, in a brief period of time, but a thorough outline of the history of the reparations movement for people of African descent. I would say even prior to Callie House, you have an example. And one of the things I said, I had the opportunity to teach a class the last couple of years, but the role of women in this movement, the role of Black women is very important. And so when we look, there was a woman by the name of Belinda in 1763, who would file a claim against her former slaveholders and received compensation. That's one of the earliest cases we find. We all also have to remember, even the title of the bill, HR 40, comes from the whole demand of our people for 40 acres and a mule, which was spurred when at the end of the Civil War, when General Sherman would take over Georgia and South Carolina, the coast, at that time, which was 80 to 90% Black. And so he goes there and he has to figure out what he's gonna do with all these Black people. And he calls for a meeting with 30 folks and he asks them, what did they want? And the demand was for land. You know, they didn't want to be integrated into the rest of the society. They wanted to have land of their own. And so after that conversation, General Sherman would ordered his field order number 15, which not only said that Black people already living there could have 40 acres, but any Black person coming there. So that became a popular demand amongst Black people who fought in the United States military during the Civil War. And remember, there were over 186,000 Black men who fought in the Civil War, and another close to 200,000 Black people who served as spies, cooks, nurses, things of that nature. So it became a popular demand. Of course, the Andrew Johnson and subsequent presidents and governments would shut down that demand. So there's been a long struggle, as my sister Kishi said, for Black people to have reparations in this country, and it still exists today.
So what were the conversations that took place to decide to take a legislative route? And were there issues of contention?
So let me just speak to that only because I was there at the time. I'll let Kim talk about HR 40 specifically, but there was a lot of contention and there was a lot of disagreement because people said, well, why we need a study commission? I mean, reparations now, okay. And there was a lot of discussion. There was a lot of debate, but it was decided this Japanese American Redress Bill, the Civil Liberties Act, had just passed and it was successful. And it was decided to strategically follow the route and path that the Japanese Americans followed, i.e. establishing a commission to study the issue and then dealing with the scenario in terms of the actual reparations in whatever form or forms it would be decided upon. But there are people who actually left the coalition because they did not feel that we needed to waste time with the study. None of us really wanted to study, but strategically, we decided to follow that route. So that was really the main areas of contention.
I just want to jump in for a second because, you know, we had areas of contention too. And that was one of the areas. I mean, there were people that were saying, you know, we've been trying to put this out of our minds for 40 years and now you want to dig it up? But for NCRR, we wanted, you know, immediate reparations now because our parents and our grandparents were getting old and they were the ones that we wanted to see win reparations. And just another area of contention was there were two main organizations, you know, going the legislative route, and that was the Japanese American Citizens League and NCRR. And the JACL was more a traditional organization, and they had been around a long time, and they had a full-time lobbyist in Washington, D.C. And NCRR, because we came out of the movement and we were inspired by, you know, you guys, we're like a grassroots organization. And so when it came to something like the hearings, you know, at first we were thinking, why do we need a study commission? But the hearings were really a positive thing. And I think part of it is because of NCRR's role, because we lobbied the commissioners to make sure that those hearings would not just be in Washington, D.C., but in other cities that had significant Japanese American populations. And so as a grassroots organization, NCRR really struggled to get people out and testify. And those hearings, you know, they changed our life. They unified the community. They put a human face on the Japanese American concentration camp experience for the whole world. And I think they were really a critical factor in winning the support we needed to win reparations. And just one other thing, I think that NCRR, not to boast about NCRR, but we really pushed for a united front. So even though there were maybe some differences within the community in terms of, you know, the face we put out to the public, you know, we were all, you know, for reparations. And even some of our legislative friends advised us, you know, don't talk about any of your differences with other members of Congress. And so I just think that it turned out that the hearings were really positive because, as you saw, every story just built on the layers of, you know, institutional racism and injustice. And I think for for me and for our community, we began to see that there is a pattern in the United States and that we have a shared history with other communities of color. And so that's why right now we are so, supportive and, wanting to work together to win Black reparations. So, I just wanted to.
I just want to say, I'm sorry, I just got to say this, because your struggle has been a model for us. And this document, this phenomenal document that you produced, is very, very helpful for us in the struggle that we're going through right now. So I just want to take off my gele and say, that's my hair wrap, and say thank you, for being that model and for being that inspiration.
And she was showing you the NCRR book, which we'll put in the chat. So over the last 30 years, John Conyers has introduced HR 40 every year. So what does it look like today? And is there a new strategy? Why is it gaining more traction now? And, as a side note, are congressional resolutions useful? And if you want to make a comment about the discussion around truth and reconciliation. It's a lot I'm throwing out to you.
You're mute.
Cam, you're muted.
Cam, you're muted.
Yeah, so that's a lot in that question.
I know.
So HR 40 has, I'll just jump in and start about HR 40. It was originally designed because this country was, white America was saying that slavery happened a long time ago, which they're still saying, and they're saying that no one's been affected by slavery who's living today. And so the initial legislation was designed to study and determine whether or not there was continued injury, and if there was, to make recommendations. So, and it wasn't clear at that particular time to white America, and some Black scholars and elite as well weren't clear on that issue. But since it was first introduced, there's been tons of research, tons of scholarship. The international community, the World Conference Against Racism, all have declared that the living conditions of Blacks who have experienced what we call people of African descent, whose ancestors experienced the transatlantic slave trade and subsequently enslavement, and after that apartheid in different areas, that our living conditions are a direct result of that history. And no one can deny that. So we didn't need to study whether or not there was continued injury. We need to study how deep and how affected that injury exists and impairs our ability to self-actualize in this country, and then to prescribe specific remedies in alignment with international norms on reparations. And so that's what we wrote into the new legislation. One, that the study was not to determine whether or not it was injury, but to look at how deep the injury exists, in what areas, and then to propose policies, programs, and projects to address that injury. And so, right now we have over 193 co-sponsors to the legislation. In the House, 20 co-sponsors in the Senate. It's the first time there's been a bill in both chambers of Congress since Reconstruction. And Keisha talked about Ta-Nehisi Coates' article. It jump-started in the mainstream conversation on reparations, and we began to continue to build. The revising of HR 40 added a lot of impetus and energy to the movement, and certainly what we've been seeing played out in this country on television and through social media, particularly the mass summary executions of Black people in this country, has all fueled this issue of the need for repair to our community. And certainly George Floyd, that public execution had a tremendous effect on the current movement, not only nationally, but also locally on the issue of reparations.
I see you nodding, Akinyele.
No, I was saying I agree with Cam that, and I think he might even want to emphasize even more the work of N'Cobra and other activists in pressing the issue and continuously pressing it and not giving up. as well as what happened on the streets, as well as what happened with the, the killing of George Floyd here in Georgia, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, all of these killings. And so it's obvious, and I think you asked the question earlier, is it just reparations against slavery? No, I mean, it's been demonstrated the continued institutionalized racism, people saying systemic racism, that's becoming a part of the conversation, particularly if you see last year in the National Basketball Association, they get in the bubble and many of the professional athletes are talking about systemic racism. And so the conversation has moved over this period of time. And again, going back to what Nkechi said, and COBRA it must be credited for broadening the conversation. Reparations has historically been an issue amongst nationalists and Pan-Africanists, but they've been inclusive where you see other people participating in the conversation. So, as when history is written, that should not be forgotten.
Thank you. There are a growing number of states that are setting up commissions and task forces and actually implementing some form of reparations. Can you briefly talk about what some of those efforts are? And do you feel that they strengthen the fight for HR 40 at the national level?
So let me just start off real quick, because you all are in California, I'm in DC, but California has a statewide commission, patterned off of HR 40. And I think it does in fact help to strengthen the fight for the federal bill. The harms were multifaceted, the culpable parties were multifaceted, the federal government, state and local government, academic and religious institutions, industries and corporations, private estates, private institutions, their culpability all across the board. And each entity really needs to look into its own casket, like what California is doing, what Chicago is doing, what Evanston, Illinois is doing, Asheville, North Carolina, Amherst, Massachusetts. Cam, you can go on and list them. I mean, it's like almost every day there's a new jurisdiction popping up with a commission or with a task force. Cam, go on and put some more flesh to that.
So you're absolutely right, Nkechi. New York actually was the first state that, Chicago, Illinois, probably about 7 years ago, or maybe even longer, passed a commission, which is basically was a study bill, just to study the issue of enslavement in Illinois. That was passed, the report was generated, but New York moved the needle to not only study, but to offer a commission that will offer some form of redress. And it was introduced in 2018. It just recently moved out of the House in the State Assembly in New York, but Evanston, Illinois in 2019, Chicago 2020, California 2020, late 2020, all actually passed legislation to create these governmental structures to look at not only examining the continued injury, but also to propose remedies, propose projects to deal with those injuries. And that's what's leading the nation, the local push. And it's the same way that local acts of civil disobedience in the 60s that were happening all around the country, not only in the South, but in the North, out West, or out East, Northeast, Southeast. They were happening all over the country, and it propelled the president to act with the Civil Rights Bill, with the Voting Rights Bill, and with the Fair Housing Act. But all of these came out of local acts of civil disobedience. And we expect the exact same thing to happen with reparations, that these local actions, these state actions, because you're gonna uncover in each one of these actions, you're gonna uncover federal complicity. In Evanston, you uncover federal complicity. In California, you're gonna uncover federal complicity. So the more acts at the local level, looking at how people are experiencing the legacy of these injuries is gonna automatically indict the federal government. And so we have to continue to push these on a local level for that purpose.
Akinyele, you wanna add anything there?
No, I just wanted to just add to it. There are at least 2 municipalities I know in Georgia, in the metropolitan Atlanta area. I don't want to mention their names to telegraph who they are, but there are at least 2 municipalities here that are having conversations about reparations, studying what happened in Evanston, Illinois, which I think was the first, correct me if I'm wrong, Cam, the first place where reparations fund was established. $10 million reparation fund was established there. And I know Cam and Cobra in Chicago played a great role in that effort. And it's interesting enough there, it's not based on slavery, it's based upon a historic pattern of discrimination against Black homeowners in particular, redlining and such. So again, it's not just based upon slavery, even though we would argue that it's based upon the vestiges of slavery, right? The legacy of slavery. So, you know, so I agree with Cam, and I would suggest everybody get his book just published on local reparations efforts. But maybe you could put it, Cam, in the chat. But these local efforts will play an important role in building this national movement, and that might be some way how the African American, or excuse me, people of African descent movement is developing in a different way than what occurred with the Japanese American restitution movement.
And actually, Mia, you asked earlier about whether white supremacy replaced slavery. And I think what Brother Dr. Professor Akinele was saying fit into that mode. The enslavement era then morphed into the Jim Crow apartheid, era, and the inequities, the health, wealth, education inequities, mass incarceration, all of that being buttressed by white supremacy. White supremacy is a vestige, is a continuation of what was going on during the enslavement era. So reparations for Black people was not just for the enslavement era, but for everything that has happened since and is still happening today. That transgeneration, that intergenerational harm, that intergenerational injury and trauma. Yeah.
So, oh gosh, before we get to our last question, okay, I just wanted to quickly ask one person. So what do you think about the resolutions? Are they helpful, or they make people confused? I'm not just talking about the Juneteenth resolution, but other resolutions that may come up. Are those helpful?
A couple of things. I think that in some ways they can be helpful, but primarily they can be used, and they probably will be used to provide a lesser route for the government to take. We'll do a Juneteenth resolution as opposed to HR 40. We'll do a Truth and Reconciliation Commission as opposed to HR 40. What we're saying about HR 40 is that HR 40 has to produce outcomes in alignment with international norms. And so we call that full reparations. So if you look at Juneteenth and even Truth and Reconciliation, they are subsumed within full reparations, consumed within the duties and responsibilities of HR 40. Both of those actions come under what the international community calls satisfaction, how you return the dignity back to people. So monuments, holidays, those type of things, Truth and Reconciliation, those things provide satisfaction. But there are 4 other components to international reparations: cessation and guarantees of non-repetition, compensation, restitution, and rehabilitation. And so when you begin to pick apart and only concentrate on this notion of satisfaction, that's not real and total and a complete emphasis on repairing a people, if that's your purpose. Mm-hmm. And so we can kind of see that maybe that's not the purpose by pushing these piecemeal proposals forward.
I just want to add to that. you know, while we have these resolutions being passed, on the other hand, people are trying to implement curriculum or erase curriculum that tells the truth. So what we just saw in terms of the hearing, there are some politicians, there are some policymakers who don't want that truth to be told. Mm-hmm. And so we know we still have a struggle that, you know, as we used to say back in the day, the struggle continues. Mm-hmm. And so we can't, just because we got a Juneteenth resolution, I'm happy to hear that. At the same time, we know we still got to fight, as Brother Cam said, to get full and complete reparations. Mm-hmm. In fact, you know, we also should add, we can't talk about reparations and we still have political prisoners from the COINTELPRO era still incarcerated in this country. And so, that, you know, the struggle still continues and we still have a lot more fighting to do.
Well, last question. What does reparations look like to you today? And also, can reparations be a road to unity for the Black community?
I'll go on and start. No, you
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not going to talk about scholarships and monuments and museums and you know, I want to just take it from a different tact if I can. I'm also a part of NARC, the National African American Reparations Commission. Brother Cam is a commissioner as well. And NARC basically's position is that no amount of material resources or monetary compensation, no amount can ever be sufficient restitution for the transgenerational, spiritual, cultural, mental, and physical genocide inflicted on Black people by centuries of the crime against humanity, which was what we call the Ma'afa, which is our Holocaust of enslavement, institution of chattel slavery, its vestiges that continue to this day. One of the things I want to say is there are many different viewpoints with respect to what reparations should look like. And the one I just want to mention briefly is what I call the right or the path to self-determination, because that's part of the remedy. After the enslavement era, we never had the opportunity to be a true self-determining people, decide what our future would hold. Would we repatriate back to Africa? If so, how? Would we go to an independent country, Haiti, the first Black republic in the Western Hemisphere? So how? Would we go somewhere else in the diaspora? Would we accept the United States offer of citizenship into the new white nation that was coming up on these shores and strive to make a multiracial democracy real? Or would we plant our own flag in the ground on this land, on this soil where we worked and built, negotiate with the native peoples and establish our own independent Black nation? So I submit, to me, reparations looks like a manifestation of each of these options, inclusive of both direct and group benefits. For those who wish to repatriate, they should have sufficient resources to be able to do so. For those who want to force this country to respect our full rights as citizens, that option must be accompanied with transformational change in policies and practices, closure of the Black-white wealth gap, all of those things, release of political prisoners. And for those who wish to establish an independent Black nation state, I come from the Black nationalist tradition on this soil, follow the model of 5 states in the South or wherever, should have the resources to be able to make that self-determining option a reality as well. So I just took it from a different tack from what you normally hear, but it is valid, just as valid as all of the other things that you normally hear.
And I agree with my sister Nkechi 125% on that. I wouldn't want to add to that. You mentioned, could it be a basis of unity? And I think it can be, but when I heard something in the hearings though, you had forces who supported reparations and you had other elements who weren't on board, right? And so I think it could pull together a critical mass of Black people. And I think it could be an element to create an even stronger movement for our total liberation. I don't think the government will ever give us what we need to get liberated. I think we'll have to do the final push ourselves, but we should demand everything that's due us and everything we can get to enable to strengthen our people so we can determine our destinies and finally be free and liberated.
Ashe, and I just quickly, because I know we're out of time, is just say what Nkechi talked about is what in COBRA, you know, we have what we call the 5 injury areas. These are the major areas in which reparations must address. And Nkechi talked about what we call peoplehood. A lot of that is the loss of our culture, loss of our sovereignty, loss of our identity. And unity is about identity. And so that's one of the injury areas. The other 4 injury areas are economics, wealth and poverty, education, number 3, health, and the criminal punishment system. So there has to be projects and proposals that are designed to eradicate the injury in each of these areas as much as possible. And so, and there's gonna be tons, you know, scores probably of proposals in each of those areas that are necessary to begin to eradicate that injury.
Well, I wish we could go on longer. This has been really, really enlightening, and you guys are so great. I just want to mention that in the chat and also in the credit slides, we'll have the titles of all the books that we mentioned that you have authored. And so I, on behalf of Nikkei Progressives and the NCRR, really like to thank Nkechi Taifa, Pam Howard, and Akinyele Umoja for honoring us with your presence and your wisdom. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for the honor and participating in this phenomenal forum.
Shout out to my friends in California. Go ahead, Cam, I'm sorry.
No, I agree with Nkechi. Thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing that painful history with us. It is a similar painful history, but you also had a victory, and we like to share that victory also. So thank you for your assistance in helping us get to our victory.
Yes, we will.
And I just want to give a personal shout out to all my friends in California, including Mia.
Okay, thank you.
Take care. Peace and power and free the land.
Yes.
By any means necessary.
That's right.
Reparations now.
Yes.
That's right.
HR 40 to the floor.
Yes.
I got to remember that one. Now we need to really push that.
Sure.
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next we're going to move to Tracy Kato Kiriyama, performance artist, activist, core member of Nikkei Progressives. And she's going to give us an update on exactly where HR 40 is today and what we need to do to work to get it passed. Tracy?
Thanks, Mia. Wow, that was so amazing. So yeah, and if the speakers are all here, we love you and respect you and follow you. And so there's so much excitement in the chat for you. So I'm really pleased and happy to be here tonight. I was supposed to do this call to action with Dreesen Heath of Human Rights Watch. And unfortunately, Dreesen's grandmother passed away this week. And so of course, their family's focus is completely on family right now. So Dreesen sends her deep, deep apologies, and we will be doing more programs together, of course. So please look out for that. But those of you who don't know, Dreesen is a researcher and advocate in the Human Rights Watch United States program focusing on racial justice issues. She's an expert on reparations and reparatory justice and has been an amazing partner and a young leader. So we send her love and gratitude. I want to give a little bit of a background on where we're at now, leading up to some of our work today, including, of course, our support for HR 40. Basic to our work is education and co-education. And we're really working to strengthen our links with what's happening on reparations work in different parts of the country, connecting, reconnecting, and learning from other folks in our own neighborhoods and region, to reparations committees from different organizations, including San Jose Nikkei Resistors, to the leaders here featured here today, to the HR 40 Coalition and the legislative strategy group that's facilitated by Human Rights Watch and Dreesen. We've also done a lot of organizing, or we've participated and co-hosted and hosted national phone banking and letter writing efforts, and working with our friends at Sudo for Solidarity and JCL, especially special shout outs to Lisa Doy and to Emily Akpan, my partners in crime over there. So we worked to print and mail the 300 plus statements of support for HR 40 that were submitted to Sudo for Solidarity at the top of the year, and mailed those to House leadership. And there were groups all across the country that were joining us in doing that. So that leads to a few calls to action tonight. With HR 40 right now, there are 193 co-sponsors of the bill, and there are several representatives who have committed to voting yes if and when HR 40 goes to the floor for a vote. They are not signing on as co-sponsors yet, but they have committed to a yes. Now, beyond that list of 193 and several folks who will vote yes, there are still 24 House Democrats who have not signed on as co-sponsors and have not answered the call to commit to being a yes vote when the vote comes to the floor. The leadership is at this point still saying that maybe September or October, there will be a vote. So there's a lot of strategizing right now around how we can push that forward. So in the follow-up email for everybody that joined tonight, we will have a list with emails to direct staffers for the leadership, for Pelosi, Clyburn, and Hoyer, for you all. And I think it's in the chat. Thank you very much, Miyako. We need to email folks and say, you know, you got literally 300 plus letters mailed to you. Each of them did. They had 300 plus, they had stacks of mail on their desks that should have arrived in the middle of July. We want to know what their thoughts were on that. We want to email this group that you see here in the chat, and again, we'll email it to you afterwards. And we want them to become co-sponsors, and we want them to set a date for a vote. They are the leadership, they need to lead. And so that's what we're urging them to do. Second, our Nikkei Progressives call to action. We're working on a collective statement, one which you'll see a video of that we've started, but we want to put it out to all of you. Why reparations now? And we would like you to submit 1 to 2 lines, starting with the word because, okay? So just put it in the chat, fill the chat up. We're gonna then take it and massage it and edit it and put it together and keep building our collective statement. We should have hundreds, we should have thousands, we should have tens of thousands of us rising up to speak out in support of reparations now. So we want to hear from you because why, okay? Third, this is a more general call. You know, it's the ongoing work to please join us, to keep co-educating with us, work with us on workshops that we've been starting to build, to develop, to take out into the community on how to even talk about this and build resources. There are so many resources out there. And so we want to really like get out there more to broaden the grassroots support for reparations, for HR 40. And so if you also are with an organization that has a reparations or abolition committee, please let us know what you're doing. Let's stay together. Let's keep getting more and more together. Let's get more on the same page of the work and keep building together. So please join us. Our committee, you know, it can be as huge as it needs to be. So join us and let us know what you're doing as well. Okay, I'm going to send it now to Michael and June. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy and Dreesen, for the legislative update and strategy and the call to action for how we can all support HR 40. Now I'd like to welcome some of our partners who are fighting for justice and reparations on the local and state level. First, I'd like to welcome Dr. Cheryl Grimes, who will be appearing by video.
Okay, you ready for me?
Cheryl, just a second. Cheryl serves on California's AB 3121 task force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It is truly an honor to be here with you on this night of commemoration. Please allow me to share a brief statement on the topic of solidarity. Why? Because our histories and our destinies are tied together, and we are stronger together than apart. We share the struggle just to be who we are as people of color, the struggle for an empowered existence in a society infused with assumptions of inferiority and intolerance of difference, multiple barriers to the affirmation of the humanity of our youth, our families, and our communities. And for Black folk, what am I speaking about? Black folks have been dealing with unmitigated, multi-generational assault on our freedom, our dignity, and our humanity. It has led to prolonged suffering across generations. And in spite of our incredible and indelible resilience, it's taking a toll on us. It's impacted the very genetic makeup of our responses to stress, as we see revealed more and more through epigenetics research. It has negatively impacted identity and sense of self. It has required us to deal 24/7, 365 with racial stress and trauma. And this racial stress and trauma involves levels of ongoing stress that overtaxes personal and collective coping resources. So I'm Cheryl Grills. I'm a member of the AB 3121 California Task Force. And our task force is charged with to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans, with a special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the US. And that means we're looking at the period of enslavement, post-enslavement Jim Crow, federal and state laws that discriminated against formerly enslaved Africans and their descendants, and so forth and so on, and to come up with strategies, recommendations for repair. And we have a little bit of teeth to our task force. For example, we have subpoena power. So we can go and interrogate the record of certain institutions, private and public. One perspective that I bring to the task force is my background in psychology. As a clinical psychologist, I have clarity on the need for healing in the reparations process and outcomes. None of us has escaped the wheel of racism that's baked into America's DNA. So the tide is changing in this racialized world of America. Now, how much and for how long depends on us recognizing our strength and solidarity, a solidarity that respects our unique history, circumstances, and cultures, while at the same time, a solidarity that builds upon our shared reality of multi-generational structural racism that constantly undermines our personal quality of life, the well-being of our communities, and the hopes and dreams and futures of our children. So this is an all hands on deck call for Ubuntu, for community, and a call for Sawubona, to truly see each other and recognize our responsibility as human beings for each other's well-being. So it's a call for unity and collective action, because we have to deal with some root cause issues. We are struggling under the weight of US settler colonialism. Now, what do I mean by that? As Sato puts it, it's a distinct type of colonialism where the settlers did not come to just extract resources and labor for their homelands, but they came to permanently stay. They facilitated strategies and policies and practices to eliminate, erase, and render invisible or disappear indigenous people from their lands and traditional territories, and to convert indigenous land into settler property. It meant the reconfiguring of indigenous land into settler property and the theft of people from their homelands in Africa to become the property of settlers to labor on stolen land. It meant making the land profitable by importing racialized migrant others to serve as a source of manipulatable, accessible, and disposable labor, and constructing foreignness, which facilitates disposability by normalizing the idea that immigrants of color may be lawfully disappeared at any time, like when they did that to the Mexican Americans who came to be seen as a surplus population during the Great Depression. And 1/3, over 1 million people, were forcibly deported from the US, 60% of whom were US citizens. So now, if we stopped and think about what I just said, we begin to see ourselves in each other's stories and realize that we are all caught up in the settler colonialism web. So I will conclude with saying one of my favorite proverbs and my favorite t-shirt saying. The proverb is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We are stronger in solidarity and can go much farther than if we go together. The t-shirt saying is, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. Reparations for me is both professional and personal. It's personal because I am a daughter of South Carolina, whose mother literally picked cotton growing up in South Carolina, whose beloved grandfather is listed in the census as a bag boy, and he had to endure sharecropping, whose family witnessed and experienced lynchings, and whose ancestors were stolen away from Ghana, Nigeria, and other parts of West Africa. And it's professional because as a psychologist, I'm very well aware of the multi-generational assault to the humanity of people of African ancestry, but also too for Indigenous, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Island American, and Latinx people. We share assaults to our humanity and dignity, exclusion from the table of decision-making that affects us, and we must then deal with the physical and psychological harms. So together, we can go far. We can educate ourselves about reparations for African Americans, educate your family and friends, attend the California Reparations Task Force hearings, speak at our listening sessions, and support HR 40. Let's think outside the box, avoid the crabs in a barrel dynamic where we fight over crumbs, and instead work together for mutual as well as group-specific benefit so that we can get out of the camps and off the plantation in body and mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Grills, for your wisdom and for your leadership on the California State Reparations Task Force. Next, we have Don Tamaki, who is a senior counsel with the Minami Tamaki Law Firm, who also sits on the State Reparations Task Force.
Thank you, June. It's really an honor for me to participate in this program. It's a special pleasure and pain to follow Cheryl Grills, Dr. Grills. How am I supposed to follow that? That was just an awesome statement of both the problem and the path forward. She is leading the effort on the task force for community engagement. And certainly that is going to be one way that the folks on this webinar and the people in your network can connect with the state task force's activity. In particular, Dr. Grills understands generational harm and generational trauma caused by that harm. And we saw that play out in the videotapes so plainly, so clearly. So I appreciate all of her comments. I'm going to direct my comments, although this is a point of unity and solidarity. I do want to direct my comments to Japanese Americans. And obviously there's no one I have to convince who's attending this event. You all know so much about the subject matter. My parents and extended family were incarcerated at Topaz, Utah concentration camp. Just by way of background, in the 1980s, at the same time that the CWRIC hearings were taking place, I was a member of the legal team representing Fred Korematsu, to successfully reopen its landmark 1944 US Supreme Court case and overturn his criminal conviction for defying the mass incarceration. How'd that happen? Well, in the 1980s, secret wartime Justice Department and intelligence agency reports surfaced about Fred's case, admitting that Japanese Americans had committed no wrong and should not have been locked up in the first place. But instead of informing the court of this evidence, the government suppressed, altered, and destroyed it in order to manipulate the outcome of the Korematsu decision. So it's really a footnote to the reparations effort of the lengths and degree that the government went, even at the highest echelons of our legal system, in order to justify this mass incarceration. The dramatic testimony, the witnesses you just heard, and really moved the needle of public opinion 40 years ago. And it would not have been possible, I have to say, but for the tireless work of NCRR grassroots organizers to whom we owe a lot. Today, I am one of 9 members of the State Task Force and the Reparations for African Americans. I can't speak for the task force, but it is my hope that the experience of the organizing efforts of NCRR and JACL and the others will provide useful lessons today that will benefit the task force effort. And again, that's another point of participation, I think, for the folks on this webinar. To state the obvious, while the harm of done to African Americans is simply unparalleled, it's unparalleled in its breadth, brutality, duration, and continuity. And anti-Black racism is uniquely pernicious. Japanese Americans know something about racism, and therefore we have something to say about reparations for African Americans. The 18-year campaign for Japanese American redress and reparations was inspired by Black leaders, and that was said many times over in this webinar, demanding that the nation live up to its espoused principles. Black leaders like Congressman Ron Dellums, that was depicted in the video, supported our cause. And while we celebrated when the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 was passed, it rightly prompted the question by African Americans, what about us? To that question, I am looking to you all in getting behind this movement, as you already are, that is so long overdue. I look to you to expose the model minority myth that has been used to pit racial groups against each other, that I'm sure you're well familiar with. And I look to you all who, in your hearts, understand the words of Martin Luther King when he said, we are not fighting just for ourselves. We are fighting for the soul of America. So to the call to action that Tracy was talking about, that's the heart of it. We are not just fighting for ourselves. We're actually fighting for the direction of this country and to shape its future. So with that, I'm going to close, but I really thank you for allowing me to participate.
Thank you so much, Don, and for your important work to overturn the Korematsu decision. Next, I'd like to welcome Do Kim, who is the board president of the KW Lee Center for Leadership.
Yes, thank you so much, June. Good evening, everyone. My name is Do Kim, and I'm with the KW Lee Center for Leadership, which is a nonprofit youth center in the heart of Koreatown, Los Angeles. I'm also part of the Out of Many, One Coalition, commemorating the 58th anniversary of the March on Washington, led by Pastor William Smart and the SCLC. We have a coalition of maybe about 20, 30 organizations that are actually having a march this Saturday in Los Angeles at Leimert Park. And we welcome everybody to come on out for that event, starting at 10 a.m. We're gonna have a march starting at Slauson and Crenshaw, headed to Leimert Park. So I wanted to just invite everybody to that as well. I also want to really thank NCRR, Nikkei Progressives, all the people here today just helped to organize this beautiful event. It was very moving. It was very touching. It was also very informative and also very inspiring to see the energy, the ideas, and the humanity that is in this room here today. For me, I wasn't planning on sharing, but for me, I grew up in Koreatown, and when I went to college, I went in undeclared. I had no idea what I was going to major in, but somehow I ended up majoring in African American studies, and everybody thought I was crazy, but for me, it was something I really wanted to learn. And for me, I wanted to be a bridge builder between the Korean and African American community. And back in 92, I joined back in 91 and 92, I joined the Black Korean Alliance in Los Angeles. And so for me, I've been doing that type of work with Pastor Smart and other local leaders. And I've been very inspired by so many community leaders that have been working together in Los Angeles to bring hope and fighting for racial solidarity. And one of the things that came to mind in terms of watching and hearing everything today is that as much as slavery was a devastating experience that tried to take away the humanity of African Americans in this country, it never did it. African Americans have been fighting for their humanity through the civil rights movement, even before, all throughout, fighting for their freedom. And through their fight for humanity and for justice, not just for themselves, it is actually for everyone. And through that experience, they have shown what true humanity really is. And for me, that is something that I will never forget, just what I have learned, but also working with so many African-American leaders and community folks. I really hope that we as Asian Americans, that we can broaden this coalition between not just between Japanese Americans and African Americans, but I hope to bring in other Koreans, other Thai, other Filipinos, Chinese Americans, Pacific Islanders. I love for us to, within our own community, to do the work that is necessary to really support Black reparations. And I hope that we can all, that's a call to action within our own community, to educate, so that we can support and do what is necessary. I wish I could, when I think about reparations, I think about two things. One is acknowledgement of the wrongs. And that's what Councilman Robert Farrell talked about. Acknowledgement of the wrongs and healing that can come out of that process. And then the other word that comes to me is investment. We need to invest in our Black communities, because we know that the statistic that we see now, because I do a lot of work in criminal justice, one of the statistics that always sticks out to me is that Black Americans are 5 times more likely to be in prison than their white counterparts. And to me, when I think about that and how that affects the Black community, that is a direct result of slavery. And for me, so for me, when I see things like that, I think this is about investment, working against mass incarceration, fighting for education, good jobs, giving the people their life and their dignity and their humanity back. So I hope that we can all do that necessary work to support this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Doe. I certainly hope that we can broaden support in all the Asian communities as well. And thank you for your work building solidarity between the Black and Korean communities. Our last person is Pastor William Smart. He's the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, of Southern California, and an organizer for the 58th Anniversary March on Washington.
Greetings, my sisters and brothers. I am Pastor William D. Smart, Jr., President and CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Southern California, SCLC. It was established by Dr. Martin Luther King. In fact, our local chapter here in Los Angeles was established by him also. Right now, we are commemorating the 58th anniversary of the March on Washington. Not only was that the time when Dr. Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech, but it was also the time that we marched in the streets for freedom, for justice, and for jobs. And today, we find ourselves in the same situation, fighting for voting rights and fighting for jobs and equality and justice. We are so happy that on this, the 40th anniversary of the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, that you have embraced this struggle with us. We are so excited that you have decided to make Black reparations a part of this, and to say that you are not free until all people are free, until African Americans get reparations. And for you to put together a program like this only shows that the Japanese American and the AAPI communities are intensely working for the struggle and the cooperation with all people. We are excited, and we want to continue to work with you as we work on these issues and other issues. We hope that your 40th anniversary tonight will be one to reflect, and that one to go forth and say this will never happen again in America, and that reparations for Black people must happen now so that everybody is treated equally. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you. God bless you.
Thank you so much to all of our partners who shared these amazing shout outs, Dr. Grills, Don Tamaki, To Kim, and Pastor Smart. Just wanted to uplift something Pastor Smart just said that rings true universally, that we aren't free until all of us are free. And so in the chat, you'll find two events for the upcoming 58th commemoration of the Week of Action happening in Los Angeles, the MLK Dreamers of Justice event this Friday at LA Memorial Park, and a March and program at Lamar Park this Saturday, as mentioned by Doe. So please click on those links for more information. And with that, we'll now show a video from members of the JA community about why they support reparations. I already see so many amazing responses, but please keep putting those one-sentence responses in the chat. It'll contribute towards an evolving and growing symbol of support from the JA community for Black reparations. And before the video, I just want to share a quote from Nicole Hannah-Jones, who is the creator of the 1619 Project, and for us, NP internally, and NCRR has been a teacher for us on reparations. So the quote reads, if Black lives are to truly matter in America, this nation must move beyond slogans and symbolism. Citizens don't inherit just the glory of their nation, but its wrongs too. A truly great country does not ignore or excuse its sins. It confronts them and then works to make them right. If we are to be redeemed, if we are to live up to the magnificent ideals upon which we were founded, we must do what is just. It is time for this country to pay its debt. It is time for reparations. Okay, great. And let's watch the video now.
We support reparations because it is long overdue.
You, the Black community, have taken blows for all people of color. We embrace your leadership in our struggle.
Even after 400 plus years, you are the vanguard in the fight against white supremacy.
私は第一世代の移民として公民権運動での戦いとそれを受けて成立した1965年の改正移民法に恩恵を受けています。黒人コミュニティが権利の獲得のために戦ってくれたからこそ私はここにいるのです。今度は私たちがすべての人々の自由のために立ち上がる時なのです。I am here today because of the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965, thanks to the 1960s Civil Rights Movement and to the Black community who fought for all of us.
We support Black reparations now because justice delayed is justice denied, and it's been far too long.
The time is now to courageously work to decolonize ourselves.
To build a movement of solidarity with Black-led organizing efforts for justice.
We need to address centuries of racism.
A debt that is owed and must be paid.
We need to restore pride and dignity.
It is never too late to do the right thing.
We need to confront this racist history to overcome the legacy of slavery and its continuing harm on Black lives. 奴隷制度という負の遺産と今日に至る黒人の人たちへの悪影響を乗り越えるためには、私たちはこの人種差別の歴史とまず向き合わなければなりません。
I support reparations because my humanity depends on it.
Because of slavery, the Black codes, Jim Crow, murder, rape, and theft.
Because my heart breaks for Emmett Till, brutalized, lynched, and dead at 14. For Tamir Rice, shot dead by police at age 12. Even children are not safe.
Because I cannot pretend that I don't see the harms and injustices of slavery or turn my back on all the George Floyds.
Because we are all living on stolen land that has been shaped by the horrors of chattel slavery.
In order to heal, this country must own up to its past and redress and remedy the damages to African American people.
The pain of harms committed will deepen and continue to manifest in new forms. We need to reckon with our past and present on the road to making amends.
We support reparations because it's the right thing to do.
Because economic justice is racial justice. There can be no just society without it.
Because of a convergence of factors. The mass outrage over the George Floyd killing.
A resistance and the awareness of racial disparities in wealth and income.
And the resurgence of a Black youth movement that is finding its role and leadership in the reparations cause.
Black resistance has never flinched against seemingly insurmountable oppression.
We must act and work in solidarity now.
The only way we lose the struggle for reparations is not to fight for it.
We support reparations because our humanity is on the line.
Because of every policy, institution, and system that led us into today.
Because there will be no reconciliation without reckoning, no healing without repair.
Justice.
Now.
Reparations.
Now.
Thanks so much to everyone who shared in the video and everyone who's sharing in the chat. And again, we'll sort of piece all of these wonderful statements together in the future. So look out for that.
Yes, this is going to be an evolving statement of support for Black reparations. Well, I think we've come to the end of our program. We did go a little bit over, but I think the information and what we heard was so important. It's fine. So I'm so glad that we were able to uplift the historic commission hearings and that August didn't go by without celebrating what our community accomplished 40 years ago. But here we are today, and we're seeing increasing relentless attacks, racist attacks on Asian Americans, and white supremacist groups and ideology are flourishing. All over the country, groups are mobilizing to get rid of ethnic studies and classes that teach the true history, the real history and experiences of people of color. So all this puts the importance of these testimonies in a new light. And it also means that fighting for Black reparations in HR 40 will be a necessary battle against white supremacy and all who try to stamp out the true history of this country, including the ugly history of slavery and its legacy today. So I hope that the program tonight helps us see the true connections that we have to the struggles of other people. And I feel really hopeful because I think we have a solid foundation which has been built over time. Just looking at today's program, I feel that unity and solidarity can't help but grow as we work together in the fight for justice and reparations.
So we want to thank everyone who contributed to tonight's event, those who enlightened us about the struggle for Black reparations in HR 40, the NP-NCRR Reparations Committee, our members who helped so much with the technical and artistic aspects of putting on this event, who are the real MVPs, and all of you for attending. If you'd like to get more involved with NP and NCRR's reparations work, please fill out your information in the Google form that's going to be in the chat. And a recording of this event, I know a bunch of people were asking, a recording of this event will be up on the NCRR YouTube channel. And we're gonna send a follow-up email with a link to the recording, a link to the full testimony videos you saw earlier, and all the resources we've shared, both in the chat and that people have mentioned, and for more information as well. And just, yeah, thank you again to all the organizers. You can see many of the folks from the video are here today. So thank you, a big shout out to them. I encourage you to go to gallery view to see everyone who's there, and give a silent applause, a mute on applause to everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. And please look out for future emails from us. And we'll play it out with more music from Dave Iwataki. Thank you so much, June, my co-host. And
thank
and
you.
you'll see everyone's names on the credits. So thanks so much.
This is the story of a soldier who was trained to oppress, trained to obey, and to never confess. Yes, till you say the truth, your consciousness won't let you rest. I remember people had little or nothing to eat. When they did, it was food that they had to pick, plant, grow, cultivate, and even clean. At the end, they could barely eat or remain on their feet. I remember people lived a longer life, wake up at dawn and work late at night, work fast, sleep fast, rest fast, die fast. I began to wonder how long they would last. I remember many put up a fight. Many of them shouted, "This isn't right." My club and gun, their spirit as a weapon. Brave people fought like warriors returning. Honestly, the inadequacy, inadequate food, inadequate housing, eradicated for good. These people are dying with blood on my hands, man. I gotta do something, watchdog. I'm your watchdog. I gotta speak the truth. Mr. Officer, what have you done? Don't you know that what you are doing is unjust? Strict violation of the Constitution. Save no book you consider free and just. This is the story of a soldier who was trained to oppress, trained to obey, and to never confess. Yes, till you say the truth, your consciousness won't let you rest. Before the judge, I pledged to the country of the United States that my services as a watchdog in Manzanar have been rendered due to my cooperation for human justice on behalf of the Japanese Americans who served time for a crime committed by a country they once upheld as free and just. I come to you not as a snitch, coward, or traitor, but as a human with dignity and a memoir. This memoir states what I remember during the months of October, November, and December. 3 months before I was let go and labeled a helper to the traitor. Locked in barricaded camps to rot. Only hope you got is to not get caught. Mom, dad, son, daughter, friends all around. Run, people, run, they hunt you with the hounds. Relocation camps, internment camps. Betrayal of a nation, it was all a trap. Relocation centers with slaves as members. Concentrated on marginalization. Let me say it through a high-powered amp. These were all concentration camps. Honestly, the inadequacy, inadequate food, inadequate housing, eradicated for good. These people are dying with blood on my hands. Dang, I gotta do something. Mr. Officer, what have you done? Don't you know that what you're doing is unjust? Strict violation of the